what's driving you. That's your vision. What's keeping you up at night. I've got to do this.
Hey, welcome back to the office. Today, I have a very special guest, Sarah Jacobson. I am so excited to have her here because not only do we have a little bit of background in coaching, we know some similar people, a similar network, but also going through her application, I feel like, Sarah, I feel like we are real sisters. Like they're like separated at birth or something. So I'm really excited. She doesn't even know what's in store. She doesn't even know like
No,
how similar
I'm
we are.
excited.
And so, yeah, this is really, really cool. So, Sarah, will you just take a moment and introduce yourself to our community?
Yes, my name is Sarah, and I call myself a startup coach because I love to help people get started with things. And that can be both in business and even just outside of business, helping people when they feel overwhelmed in that starting phase. Like that's where I thrive. I'm always good in a crisis because it just doesn't phase me. I live in Colorado with my husband. We've been married for 19 years, and we have two boys who are, keeping us busy. Teenage boys. We spend a lot of time on the soccer field, a lot of time, doing all the teenage things, and we are just loving this phase of life. I left my job about 2 years ago in June of 2021. If you remember, that was in the middle of that huge pandemic that we
Yeah.
had that we all want to forget. I was a school administrator and I loved my job. I loved it. Was on track to fulfill my career long dream to become a principal. And God said, Sarah, it's time to let that go. And I think there was a lot of brokenness for me in my relationship to work and my love of working, that it was really pulling me away from what I needed to be doing, which was raising my children and spending time with my family and putting some of those things as a priority. So I
Mm,
stepped out of that job and stepped in to coaching and using those teaching and organizing and starting up skills just in a totally different format. And so now I love what I do. I've got, that dream of having the flexible job and doing what I love and working with clients that are just, that I love working with, but not being so tied down to that, it
mm.
wasn't a 9 to 5. It was a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., job. And so, yeah, that's kind of been my journey over the last couple of years and what I love to do.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, so part of what we have in common is I don't know if you knew this, but I was a teacher. So I
Okay.
actually taught for the district here for 10 years, but involved much longer than that, right?
Yeah.
But I left to I didn't leave during the COVID time, but I did leave to raise my children. I was having my
Mhm.
first child and
Yeah.
it was tough. I actually went through a bit of an identity crisis, right?
Mhm.
Did you experience that? And if you did, like what was
Oh,
that like
yeah.
for you?
Yes. Everybody thinks, "Oh, you're quitting your job. It's gonna be
Yay, good for
amazing," and like,
you.
"Woo." And I mean, there were parts of that, but man, that summer after I left, I don't know that I was depressed. I have experienced those seasons before, but it was a struggle because I didn't know what to do. You think, "Oh, now you have every day, all day to do whatever you want." But man, when you're kind of addicted to working and
Oh
having a
yeah.
to-do list and having these demands and people um, you know, expecting you to do things of you, and you don't have any of that anymore, it's tough. And I really struggled that summer. I allowed myself June, July, August to really just be with my family. My
Mm.
husband is also a teacher, and so he's always off in the summer. So, we just tried to enjoy that summer. But then when they went off to school on that first day of school, and it was literally the first time in 40 years that I was not living that school rhythm. We live it
Wow.
all through kindergarten, through high school,
Yeah.
through college, and then I lived it through teaching.
Mhm.
It was tough, and I'm just really grateful because I look back now that I just really spent that time digging into the word. And
Mm.
I had missed that when I was working full time and I hadn't done it. I had really let it go. I had been prior, in BSF and community Bible study and really in the word, and I had let that go. And so I just allowed myself that fall to spend a lot of time reading God's word and meditating. That's not who I am normally, but gosh, I just fell in love with that and what God had to say about me, not what work had to say about me. And so
Yeah.
that was really my journey, but it was a real challenge, and I don't think people talk about that transition enough.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. When I left, so I'd also become a brand new mom and I was
Mhm,
still newer in marriage. There was a lot of things that were shifting in my
mhm,
personal life that suddenly, like losing my career was a huge, huge part of me
mhm,
and something that, yeah, I struggled with later on. And I didn't realize what was going on, why I was feeling sort of like this
mhm,
hole, right?
mhm,
And so I was
mhm.
trying to fill it with other things
Yes.
or then finding like I remember getting to a point where I didn't even know what to do with myself anymore except for
Mhm.
be a mom, you know, and like that is
Uh-huh.
the highest calling for sure.
Right.
But yeah, when something has become such a part of you, I mean, from fourth grade, I decided that's when I was going to be a teacher, and it just
Mhm,
stuck ever
mhm.
since, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally relate to that. Um, and then finding, that balance of time with the Lord again, like
Mhm,
so important,
mhm,
really important. So you had also mentioned about moving into so like part of what you do now is help with organizing and essentially creating systems, right? Like you're helping
mhm,
people start their business. And you
mhm.
said like that's kind of what you did in the classroom. And I totally get that.
Yeah.
Which is also what I do, helping people implement these systems. And then, of course, like understanding the sales process and all of that good stuff.
Right.
But like, in order to have a successful business that continues to grow, like these systems are important. So, what kind of things did you learn in the classroom or education environment that you were able to transfer to your clients?
As a teacher, I think one of the things, and even as a school administrator, we have to be really intentional because a school year is 10 months long, but it's only 10 months long. And you only have those kids, those set of teachers, that school year for a short period of time. And my husband and I have always worked really hard to live our lives very intentionally. Whatever decisions we make, let's make it very intentionally. For us, we send our kids to public school. We've made that a very intentional decision. I think homeschooling is a great option. There's a million different options out there, but we've been very
Mhm.
intentional about choosing that. And a lot of the choices our family has made has been very intentional. And I think that is what I've really transferred over into business is you have to be really intentional
Yeah.
from the start because otherwise you can spend months or even years in this starting phase in this like spin cycle of pretending you're going to get started and like trying this and getting trapped in purchasing all these different programs because you think you need all of this stuff. And so I just am really really intentional about helping people with the work they need to do. I my slogan, like my Instagram handle, is do the right work because I think you have to do the right work. As a third grade teacher, I could teach you a lot of great things. We could have a lot of fun together. We could read a lot of books together. But if I'm not really intentional about what I'm teaching you and how I'm teaching that to you, it's going to be a really rough year. And I think that's the same thing in business. We've got to do the right work. I if people know the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I'm very like pushy, people might say a little bossy, but I think that my spiritual gifting is I know what work you should be doing and I'm not going to be afraid to tell you
Oh,
you
yeah.
need to do this and you need to just leave that alone for right now. Don't do that. I was just on a coaching call this morning. I'm like, don't do that stuff. Do this and then we'll talk. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really one of the biggest things I brought over from teaching and being in the school system into business.
Yeah, so cool. So, would you say that the most of the people that you work with, not all maybe, but do you feel like most of the people you work with are just getting started?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
cool.
people who have an idea, but they
Yeah,
don't know what to do.
yeah, that's so important. You had said the people get stuck in the starting phase for too long,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that's what I see a lot of people as well. And
Yeah.
and so the thing that I always say is cutting the fluff because
Mm,
people
mhm,
they're learning, they're picking up freebies everywhere there, which is
mhm.
fine, there's a season for things. But and then again, like the only freebies you should be picking up are if they perfectly align with your goals. That's my
Right,
thoughts. But
right, right.
but Yeah, so, like, being able to look at somebody's, what are their actual workflows and, like, what are you spending all your time on? Let's cut all
Mhm,
this stuff. Like,
mhm.
you don't need to do all these things that you see these big wigs doing,
Right.
and really, you don't even need to do all of that,
Mhm,
so I think it's so valuable to understand what the right work is,
mhm,
and then being able to create a system or a workflow of sorts so that like, when you sit down, this is what you're going to do
mhm,
and how to
mhm.
do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
beneficial. I love that. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna say my example with all the freebies, because I
Yeah.
think when you start out, we are freebie junkies and we want all this stuff and we're like hoarding all this knowledge. But you have to go into it knowing that all of those freebies that you're downloading are a little tiny piece of that person's puzzle. And if you're trying to take all of these freebies and piece them together, it's not
Mm,
going to make a beautiful
yeah,
picture, because you're taking Teresa's piece of this puzzle, Sarah's piece of her puzzle. They aren't the same.
they
They
aren't the
might be
same.
similar and we get the same goals, but now you've got all these downloads, and even if you buy the $37 thing and the $97 thing, you're going to end up with this mismatched huge puzzle that doesn't make any sense. And it's
Yeah.
not the right work to be doing. It's just more confusing.
Yeah. So, I always think like it's so good to be able to find a mentor that you like
Mhm,
and you trust them. Maybe you've gone to some of their master classes.
mhm,
So you got like a little sample of what it's like to work with them. But finding a mentor or a coach strategist that you can work with, and then taking what they give you, um, and applying what you can. And then the things that don't fit exactly, asking for help of how you can make
mhm,
that work for your
mhm,
particular business. Because
mhm.
even when we have sort of that whole picture from one person, which I do think is a better option than piecing together, like you said,
Right.
right? But even when we have that full picture from that mentor, it's still up to us
Mhm,
to make it fit into our character and goals and
mhm.
whatnot. Yeah, I think that's such good advice. So, if somebody were to come to you, Sarah, and they'd say, "Okay, I'm trying to get started. What are a couple of things that I should focus on now?" What would be that right work for them right now?
Well, the first thing I'll say is you don't start with a website or a logo or any of that stuff. I see people do that all the time. And quite honestly, that's how I started. I was like, let's make a logo. It'll be
Yeah, let's
super
make
fun.
all pretty
And
stuff
it
and
is fun.
spend hours in Canva.
All the stuff, which, to some extent you do have to start somewhere and then learn from your mistakes. And so
Yeah.
that is a way to start, but I don't think it's doing the right work. I use a lot of like you see, I talk with my hands, a lot of things on my hands and like reminders and mnemonic devices. And so I use a 5 finger approach to help
That's
people. And I
good.
actually was doing this on a coaching call this morning. I think the best place to start, and you don't have to go in order, but it's with these 5 main things. And I visited China a number of years ago before COVID, and I learned how to use chopsticks. So the first two are kind of like chopsticks, they go together. And that is, what problem do you solve? What problem do you uniquely solve
Mm,
that's different in a way that nobody else is doing? And who is your audience? What's your niche? I mean, you can call it a lot of different things, and I teach niche a little differently than everybody else, but those go together. What problem do you solve and who do you solve it for? And
yeah.
then the big three are mission, vision, and values. You've got to know what you're going to be doing on the day to day, what's driving you. That's your vision. What's keeping you up at night? I've got to do this, meet this vision. And then what do I value? And what's going to drive me in my business, those values. And so I think those 5 are really just the best place to start. You could start with your mission, you could start with your values, but getting those 5 in place, and then the palm that holds all of those things together is the 6th item, which is really, what method are you going to do that's unique for you to meet all of those things? How are you going to help your audience? Some people call it a framework, some people, it might be phases or pillars, but what's that unique method that you're going to
Mm,
use in order to carry out your business to the right people, solving the right problem with that mission, vision, and values? And then the bonus one is really your arm that holds it all together, and that's your system and workflows. But those come later. I wouldn't necessarily start there. I would start with some of these other ones, because
yeah.
then you've got your good good high five. And then when you get your systems, you can actually like put it all together and make it
Yeah,
work.
I just
So
want to
that's
high
what I
five you back.
remember. Yes, that's right. So,
That's awesome. I love your visual. Oh my goodness. Like definitely education background.
yeah.
I think that's so great. So great. Okay, but in saying that, so we have the high five, those five
Mhm,
main things.
mhm,
But there are people that come into my network and they get hung up on
mhm,
the niche and
mhm,
the mission and vision because they just aren't
mhm,
sure, right?
mhm.
And so when somebody comes to you and says, "But Sarah, I don't get it. Like I feel like I'm called to this, but I just don't get it." Like what would be your advice for them?
Mhm. Yeah, the first thing is that I say all the time, and I have a podcast with my biz bestie, and we say this all the time too,
I love
is
that.
you've got to invite God into your business. You've
Mm,
got to stop and you've got to pray. And we say palms up. You put your palms up and you say, Lord, what is it that you are inviting me into in this process? Because I
mm,
think we forget that all too often. And we think
yeah,
that my business is over here and God is over here. And I firmly believe that God wants us to be successful in our business. And I believe in James 1, 5, and 6 that says, if you don't know what to do, then ask the Lord for help. Ask believingly, ask boldly, and He will tell you the answer.
yeah.
And so, if we really believe that to be true, I just think we forget about praying because God is not a God of chaos. He has an order to things, and
Yeah.
He wants to give that to us. So the first thing I would say is to pray. The second thing I would say is that as a business owner, we have to be okay when things are about 75%. You just have
I
to
love
get
it.
comfortable with it's never going
Uh,
to be perfect. It's just not. We want to do things well, and I believe that God does call us to do things well and with excellence. But we also have to be okay at doing things with 75%. And I also tell my clients a lot of times to just use a pencil. Throw your pen away because it feels like you're putting it in permanent ink. And I just use the pencil because then mentally it tells me I can erase this,
Erase
I
it.
can change this, I can try it. But we have to get comfortable with that, even 60 to 75% being okay. And then you just got to go try it. And then it's written in pencil. So come back and update and make changes as needed as you learn more.
Yeah. Oh, everything about that is so wise. Everything. I'm a huge advocate for clarity produces or
Mhm,
action produces clarity.
mhm,
And so like
absolutely.
that 75% resonates so well with me
Mhm,
because it isn't until we start putting things into action that we really receive like that next step or understanding like, okay, maybe this wasn't the right thing. But
mhm,
that like it's so important for us to remember in business we can change anything. We are not
right,
married to anything.
right.
And so even when clients are involved, we do the right thing and we honor the
Mhm,
agreements that we made with certain clients.
mhm,
But ultimately, we ebb and flow and our business is going to ebb and flow with us. And there is a
mhm,
growing process of
mhm,
like trying it, figuring out, take what works, take what doesn't, and that's where strategy
mhm.
comes in too.
Right,
And then I
right.
want to say on first off, what's the name of your podcast? Because everybody should know.
Uh, yes, it's the Christian business breakdown. So we break your business down so you don't have a breakdown. And so
Oh,
she and
I
I,
love it.
it's really nice because there's two of us and we have different opinions on things and different ways of doing it. So you get
Ah,
two for one on the podcast.
that's cool. Do you guys do it together or do you do your
Mhm.
own shows together?
We do it together, yes. So we
So
we
cool.
pick a topic and we talk about it, and we talk about it from different angles. She's a service-based in-person photographer. She's a professional photographer, so her business is just a little bit different than mine.
Yeah.
Me being online and coaching, and so it's nice to have those different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so cool. We'll definitely check out her podcast. So
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, but you mentioned excuse me, you mentioned one of the most important things is to go to God.
Mhm,
So I want to second this because it is truly what shifted me and my entire business. So
mhm,
when I first got started, I got into this coaching program and I learned so much, but it was so busy and so much
mhm,
hustle culture
mhm.
that I mean, and we met every day for a little over an hour, and then we had our
Wow.
own meetings and then our own business. And like it was just so much that
Mhm.
by the time my launch actually happened, first off, it wasn't very fruitful, even though it was the most awesome launch ever. It wasn't
Right.
fruitful, but
Mhm,
I think it wasn't fruitful because it was the wrong seed, right?
Mhm.
And excuse me, during the time that I was in that coaching program for 4 months, um, because I was living in so much hustle that I woke up and I got to work and I worked and I
Mhm.
worked and I worked because there was so much to
Mhm.
do. I
Mhm.
homeschool, so I had a homeschool still. Thankfully,
Mhm.
that didn't, get put off, but my time with the Lord did get put off.
Mhm.
And then I remember like right after my launch, Facebook shut me down. And it was like this answer to prayer. And I was like, thank you, God. Because I totally felt imbalanced. I just didn't understand what was
Right.
going on. And
Yeah.
it was restored within 2 days. But I decided to take that whole month of April off back in, I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021. But
All
anyway,
kind of blurs, yes.
yeah. But that entire month, I gave the Lord hours every single morning,
Mhm.
and it was
Mhm.
just I call it my creator collab or a
Mhm.
business meeting with God, and I just
Mhm.
sat intentionally with my noise canceling headphones on,
Mhm.
and quiet because at first I felt so distant from God because I
Mhm.
hadn't even prayed really with Him in those 4 months.
Mhm.
That at first it was just me being quiet and listening. And then over time, I would get something and I just write it down and journal about it and I bring it back to Him the next day. And then by the end of April, I had this beautiful business plan.
Mhm.
And I was only released to teach a little morning routine workshop for the next 4 or 5 months. But every time I taught it, it was fully sold out.
Mm.
And it was all about starting the day with the Lord or starting the
Mm.
day in a way that brings honor to yourself and to your family and to the
Yeah.
Lord. And
Yes.
and since then, like that is the number one thing that I tell my clients too is like you need to have this time set aside. It doesn't have to be every day, but like once a week, shoot for having a business meeting with God to go over the plans, to make sure
Yeah.
you're on the right track with Him, to pray over your current clients and your future
Yes.
clients that are coming. So, so important and invaluable that you shared that. So, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So, you had mentioned that your boys play soccer or somebody plays soccer.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
made me think about like you're an online business owner, you have a family, you must have some decent time management skills. Hopefully, maybe.
Hopefully.
So, what would be some advice that you would give? I don't know, and maybe not advice, but just like maybe share about what life is like as a business owner and still treating your family like priority.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question, and I will say I do have really great time management skills, and I still really struggle with this because like I mentioned at the beginning, I really do have a broken relationship with work, and I could work all the time. I love to work, I
Yeah,
love to be
me too.
busy, and so I there is a big tension there. And so for anyone who's like, "Oh, these gals have it all figured out." No, I do not. I still
Nope.
struggle. You know, I still have my husband that's like, "Sarah, he's a big believer in Sabbath." And so he reminds me all the time, "Sarah, it's a day to rest. We're
Yay.
taking time off." And so just know there are seasons where it's great and other seasons where it's like, man, that month I bombed, you know.
Yeah.
I think for me, part of it is I feel a bit of urgency with my children because they are older. And like with my oldest, I have less than 3 years left before he goes to college. And so there is just that sense of urgency that you feel as your kids get older that I want to make the most of this time.
Yeah.
They both play high levels of soccer. And so we're traveling, we're driving, you know, he doesn't drive yet. And so we're driving all over. And so it's been a season of learning how to make the most of every opportunity. If I have to go to practice and sit at practice for an hour or two, then either what am I working on that I can bring with in my business and make time for that, or
Mm,
I need to take a walk and I need to not do anything. And it's again, it goes back to that intentional piece of how am I spending my time? And so I have a couple of tools that I use and I
oh,
teach
good.
in my business. um, One of them is part of a bigger program that I have, but I just am a really big believer of having that weekly check-in. I know you talked about that like weekly meeting with God or you know whatever you want to call it, but I do it on Monday mornings. I just did it this morning before our meeting, and it's a weekly check-in, and it's a personal one, a spiritual one, and a business one where I check in and I I look at the goals that I have and I look at the progress from the last week. And the question I ask is, did I do what I said I was going to do? Because I want to be a woman of my word and let my yes be yes and my no be no. And that can be a tough question because there's some weeks I look at my list and I'm like, I didn't do it. I didn't get done what I said I was going to do. But then I ask myself, why? Why didn't I get it done? Well, last week was the first week of school. We were just getting back in rhythm, and I chose to prioritize my children over my business because it was the first week back, and I made that conscious choice. And so then I can say, all right, this week is the week I'm going to get back into things. And so there's just that weekly check in. I have a process to do that. So it only takes 5 to 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be this like, I don't believe in complicated planners or like, this extensive process. It's literally just that check in. Did I do what I said I was going to do? And what do I need to do this week in response to that? So having those weekly check ins. And then I also encourage my clients to do a quick schedule of their week because we are so busy. We need to have a 1-page sheet that just outlines all of the things that we're responsible for and also puts in those big chunks of time that we need to work on our business, because we tend to do like 30 minutes here and then an hour here or whatever. It's like we need to have those blocks of time where I know for 3 hours I'm going to be uninterrupted. I can really dive into an email sequence or a sales page or whatever that is. And so I really encourage a weekly check-in. And then the one of the other big things that I teach people is to have a check-in and a check-out routine. And so that our work time becomes very defined, because otherwise we would just be doing it all the time and never really, we're working in our business, but not really on our business in that in-depth thing. So I do, I'm a teacher, so I do the check in and check out. So when I check into my business, I sit down, I pray with palms up over my business. Lord, help me, with today's work. It doesn't have to be this long thing. And then I do all those little bitty tasks that tend to take up our time and energy, checking email, checking social media, checking people into my Facebook group, doing all those little tasks that distract us during the day. And then I close those tabs because you don't need to be checking email
Yep.
all day long. You don't need to be checking social media. And then I do that checkout routine again at the end of the day to just close it out, close my computer, shut it down, and say, I'm done. And the work that I have done is plenty. And I can be done and leave it behind. And I think when we do those check in and check out routines, it trains our brain that this is work time, this is my workspace, and now I'm going to leave and I'm going to go be present with my family or at soccer or when I go for a run or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But those tools have really helped me manage my time, know when I'm winning, know when I need to make
Mm,
some changes,
yeah.
partner with God. It helps me communicate to my family, hey, I've got on my schedule this week, this is when I'm working, like this summer when they were home. I need this time not interrupted, but also I have this time set aside to spend with you. So it helps communicate in that way too.
Yeah. So good. Yeah, I think that's one of the best things to do for a business, for actually any life, is to learn how to manage our time wisely,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Um, one of the things I say in one of my programs that is also time management, is like guarding our time like we guard our heart,
mm,
because we only have a set amount of time. And so what we do
mhm,
with it really does matter. And I love that you
mhm,
said closing out the windows that you don't need.
mhm.
Um, Again, I agree wholeheartedly. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I have these blocks of time that, usually are first thing in the morning, and
Mhm,
at the end of the day, I make sure I check all of my email. So when I get to my computer, and I write down like, okay, in tomorrow's block of time, this is what I'm going to do, the step by step, and
mhm,
I make sure that I have
mhm,
all the tools already out. So if I'm going to use
mhm,
Canva, I open the
mhm,
actual file in Canva, so it's on my
mhm,
computer, ready to go the next morning, and I
mhm.
complete the task. And then after my big blocks or time are completed, then I go into doing those types of things.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so regardless of what system you use, having a system is really important.
Mhm,
Having those big blocks of time is super important.
mhm,
And I know, like, as moms with kids still in the home, or working with, maybe you're homeschooling or what, um, like, don't let your kids become the excuse of not finding the
mhm,
time. Because
mhm.
if it is important to us, if it is a priority, we will find the time to do it, even if that means waking up at 5:30 to get to work.
Yes. Yes.
So, I know for a period it was like, oh, I can't do it. I have my kids. But it was
Mhm.
like, no, wait, what am I saying? What am I saying about the thing that I
Yeah,
think God really called me to? Right. Like, no,
right.
if it's a priority, then we make the time to do that. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Um, and you also mentioned Sabbath. So
Mhm.
very wise. I'm glad that your husband does that as well. I'll
Yes.
say like that is probably the best thing that we started keeping a Sabbath on about goodness. Are me and my husband married 11 years or 12 years? I think 11 years. I think we just had our 11th. It might have been our 12th, but anyway, that long. So we
Mhm.
got married and then we started keeping Sabbath together,
Mhm.
as said in the Bible. And so that was like this really cool transition for us. But continuing on with that has been so good for business
Mhm.
because over time you realize like we're to toil and work for 6 days and we
Mhm.
rest on that seventh. And it is a different kind of rest.
Mhm.
And, even in the daytime, we are still called to rest. I think rest is like one of the biggest things about being productive. Like a lot of people
Mhm.
think, no, there's no time to rest because I have to work, but you actually work better if you rest. And
Mhm.
so for me, if I start feeling in the day, if I start feeling, I don't know, I guess the word for it would be like anxiety, like kind of
Mhm.
like tightness in here, like, oh, I got to do this. And if
Mhm.
I feel like my brain can't shut off, I know that's a
Mhm.
big indicator for me
Mhm.
that I need to have some quiet time, and it's a
Mhm.
practice. It's a
Yes.
practice to try to get your
Yes.
mind to shut off so you
Mhm.
can rest for a
Mhm.
bit and then hop back to work.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the biggest things that was very influential to me is after I left my job a couple of years ago, I took a class at church and now I actually teach it at church. It's called Unique and it's a life design class of living a life by design and partnering with God in the
Oh,
life
cool.
that you want to lead. But one of the lessons that it teaches is that if you read Genesis 1, the way that the Hebrew calendar works is that the day begins at night.
Night. Yeah.
It's the night. And so you rest for the next day's work, not from today's work. And so
Mm,
that is really shifted my mindset of
mm,
tonight when I go to bed, I need to rest for the work that I have to do tomorrow. I didn't
mm.
earn rest because I was productive today. It's not a reward like I got a treat because I did enough work today and now I get to sleep. It's that God says, I have work for you to do that's set aside just for you to do. And I need you to be a good steward of your time and be prepared to do whatever I have for you tomorrow. And so I need to
Love
go to
that.
bed and rest and shut down my mind to be prepared to do that work. But it's a spiritual discipline. It's a practice
Yeah.
that we have to do. We're going to get it right sometimes and we're not going to get it right others. There are seasons where it works
Yeah.
well and it doesn't. And
Yeah.
I just have really learned that when we don't Sabbath, we are telling God that his plan is not a good one.
Right.
That we think we've got a better way of living than God's design. And
Hmm.
so I that really humbles me when I'm like, okay, it's Sunday afternoon. Because we try and Sabbath from Saturday evening to Sunday evening, and then that gives me a little bit of permission on Sunday evening to
Yeah.
kind of get things together a little bit. But
Yeah.
that 24-hour break, but that humbles me when I remember when I think, oh, I'm just going to get a little bit more done and I can just work. And I hear God say, Sarah, that's not my plan for you. That's not the way this works. That's not this design. And who are you to think that you have a better way of doing it? And it's not a shame thing. It's just a reminder of I am not God. I don't want to be God. And I actually want to follow his plan because it's way better than
Way
anything I
better.
could ever imagine. So it's
Way
just it's
better.
a good reminder. And we found some other people at church that really also value Sabbath. And I think that helps to have other people that are kind
Yeah.
of holding you accountable and encouraging you and reminding you. And they do theirs Friday night to Saturday night. And it's a little different, but it's the same idea.
Yeah. Yeah, we do ours Friday night to Saturday night as well. But
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think it's so cool that you guys do it evening to evening because of the Hebrew
Mhm.
calendar. So I think that's
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
cool. And
Yeah.
I feel like more and more people are learning sort of the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew side of things to the
Mhm.
Bible. And I think
Mhm.
that is so important because
Mhm.
Jesus was Jewish, he was
Yeah.
part of the Hebrew culture. So it's important to
Yeah.
understand that culture so that we can
Mhm.
understand certain parts of the Bible as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, super, super cool. And using evening rest to prepare for the next day. I never viewed it that way,
Mhm,
but so cool. Yes,
mhm.
I love that. And yeah, Sabbath is it's a gift. The
Yes.
God's rest is a gift to us. So it's not like to make us feel bad if we choose to work on that day. No, it's like a reminder of saying, hey, like I've given you all this time to work, and
Mhm,
now this is your gift. This is your time to rest and just trust
mhm,
me with the bigger picture.
mhm,
Trust me.
mhm.
And I
Yes,
think like we can build really good stuff by ourselves, but I tried that and it was a really good thing, but it
yes,
wasn't fruitful in the right way. And
no.
even if there was like, 100 people that bought into that program would not have felt good. It would not have been fruitful to this day because it would have been so misaligned. And so
Mhm,
allowing God
mhm,
time in my life to give me rest so that he could
mhm,
mold me and so I could
mhm.
hear for his direction, what he's built is so much greater than
Yes, for
that.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we say it as like the cheesy church thing, but standing in the center of God's will and where he wants us to be is both the most dangerous and scary place to be
Mm,
and also the best place to be. And
yeah.
so my husband and I have just tried to be really intentional about that of this is where we want to be no matter what other people have to say or
Yeah.
what society thinks or culture tells us because this is what God has invited us into and how can we support you in what God's invited you into because it's going to be different for
Yeah.
you. But how can we partner together to fulfill that? Because I just believe that that means the body of Christ is so much stronger when we're all doing that. So it's kind of selfish motivated. I want you to be doing what you should be
Yeah.
doing. And you should be wanting me to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing because we're stronger when we stand together and are doing what God has asked us to do in the body of Christ.
Yeah, I agree. So, Sarah, tell us what are some of your future goals? What are you working towards?
Yeah. So in my own personal business, I am really at just a pivotal stage of having gone through kind of the startup phase and now what's next. I have a program that I love, I have great clients, but like what does that mean for me now? And so I think that I'm entering into that season again, kind of like you've mentioned of just really praying and asking God, okay, I've done this work. Now what's the right next work for me? I would love to be able to grow and expand that business and, I've got some big goals. I'd love to, do more speaking and speaking at summits and,
Yeah.
and speaking in churches and just seeing where God takes me in that process. My podcast that I have with my friend that I mentioned, we do a couple of retreats every year. And so we have big goals there with bringing women in and giving them both a space to retreat and rest, but also to get work done in their business away from their, regular daily
Yeah.
lives. And so, yeah, just seeing where God takes us. My family and myself and my business over the next 6 to 12 months. And like you said, trusting that process and trusting that he's working on my behalf behind the scenes and I don't even know it.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And for everybody who's watching, just know that if you'd like to get a hold of Sarah, all of her information will be in the description of this video. Definitely do go check her out. Check out her podcast.
Yes.
And Sarah, yeah, thanks again so much for being here. If you have any questions for Sarah, she is inside of our productive and profitable
Yes.
community as well. And you can
Yeah.
ask any questions to her directly there or in the comments of this video. All right, that's it. So
Yeah.
until
Thank you
next
so much.
time, yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome. Thanks again, Sarah. The Productive and Profitable channel is all about helping entrepreneurs grow wildly profitable businesses without sacrificing time with their families or the things they love. And we do this through top notch trainings and community. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications button so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you're ready to dive deeper and take your business to the next level, be sure to join our free business community over on Facebook. Simply visit teresataylorcoaching.com and hit the community tab. We can't wait to see you over there.